I'm Dr. Dave Janda. Welcome back to our combined series of the Operation Freedom Briefings and Dave versus the MSM. I'd like to thank you for joining me today. Thank you for networking this information, and I hope you'll become part of our Freedom family and join us at davejanda.com. Tremendous amount of free public information and content there. You can stream our live radio show from 2 to 4 Eastern by going to the Listen Live button. It's free. Now, if you want the podcast, it's part of our premium service content service, along with the 4 to 5 other video format shows I do every week on content I cannot discuss on social media platforms because it would immediately lead to my not just suspension, but removal from those platforms. And obviously that doesn't help us in getting at least part of the word out. But the real in-depth information that puts you months and years ahead of the curve is davejanda.com. We also have our ticker, news ticker, like no other ticker on the planet, because our IT team provides it to no other platform on the planet. And when you go see the ticker, if there's a story that you see go by on the ticker, just click it and you take you right to it. We hope you become part of our Freedom family. Today I want to discuss our adversary, whatever you want to call it. The criminal international banking syndicate, the New World Order crowd, the globalist syndicate, the globalist cult, the deep state, the shadow government, it's all the same. And they all have the same psychological personality trait, let's put it. They're psychopaths. So today I want to discuss about power and psychopaths. One of the big problems in the freedom movement, as I see it, and you could well disagree, but when I survey the freedom movement, wonderful people, patriotic people, kind people, but I believe there is a lack of recognition of how truly evil the syndicate is. Too many people say, well, Donald Trump's back in office. He has his team around him, although there are a number of questionable people in his team. Example, Susie Wiles is chief of staff. Globalist. That's being kind. So I can just go back to the couch. I don't need to network any information. It's all being handled by Don and crew. This is beyond one guy or one group of people. This is about all of us mobilizing. That is how we defeat our adversary. That is focused on obtaining more control, more power, and more financial resources, and in the process, stripping each and every one of us, not just in the United States, but around the world, of our remaining freedoms, liberties, health, future, and lives. Every child you pass on the street, every child in your neighborhood, every child in your family, every child that you're acquainted with is dependent on us, you and me, stepping up and stepping out and educating and empowering others. Because with that educating and empowering of others leads to light, the bright lights of fact and truth on these globalist scum who only care about themselves and don't give a rip about any of us or our futures. It is critical that we know what they are capable of doing and to what length they will go to achieve their goals and objectives, which are, again, more power, more control, more financial resources, and ending each and every one of our remaining freedoms and liberties. Frank Herbert, the author, stated, quote, "All governments suffer a recurring problem. Power attracts pathological personalities. It is not that power corrupts, but that it is magnetic to the corruptible." Frank got it right. But too few people you know and love realize that. And that's where we come in. Much of the information we deliver, I realize, to those we know and love and work with or live near or whoever, when we start speaking about these issues, give us a stiff arm, right? Push us away. Ignore us. Roll their eyes to the back of their head. But it is critical, folks, that we don't spoon feed them, but we provide them food for thought. Because, yes, some of those seeds that we try to plant lay fallow. They don't germinate. But there are some of those seeds we plant about the information we bring to them that do germinate and do sprout and do grow. And in the process, they enlighten and empower those that we have taken the time and effort to speak with. What the globalist cult wants most is for us to be mute, to not call our elected representatives and tell them that we're on to them on whatever the issue might be, and they get better move off a dead center, because if they don't, then they become complicit in whatever that issue might be, name it. And that you and those around you are going to make sure that, well, they get primaried out if they don't move on this. Or they might even get recalled. No, I know people, oh, they don't listen. They don't, oh, no. They get enough calls. Yeah, they listen. And it scares the living daylights out of them, because they don't want to move from their big fat leather cushy chair. They want to have roots into that so that they never get disrupted. But when they think you're onto them, ooh, that makes those roots shrivel and dry up. And they don't like that feeling. That's why we always have to keep them on the hot seat. Hot seat of truth, facts, data, science when needed. The psychopaths can't stand that. Frederick Douglass, decades ago, said the following: "Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found out the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them, and these will continue until they are resisted with either words or blows, or with both. The limits of tyrants," all psychopaths, "are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress." End quote. Reader's Digest version. Get off the couch. Don't stay mute. What was the first thing they did in 2019? We're going to lock you down. We don't want you to leave your home. Here in Michigan with the Commandant Klink of governors, Whitmer. We don't want you cutting your grass. We don't want you buying paint or plants. I can still remember going to Costco, because I refused to be locked down, going to Costco, and they had all these beautiful hydrangeas and rhododendrons and azaleas, ready to be planted in people's yards, all cordoned off in these big plastic barriers, because the governor, the commandant here, said, you can't do that. What? The first thing they do, just look at their operation from 2019. They want you locked down. They want you in fear. They want you mute. They don't want you communicating with your neighbors. In fact, they'd rather have you turning in their neighbors, their old divide and conquer technique. Look, the clinical diagnosis for all these people, true. Psychopaths. Yeah. Know your enemy. Why was, my dad served in World War II, served in Europe. And his favorite general was George Patton. Many reasons why, but one of which is, and one of which he taught his son, when you have an adversary, do what Patton did. Learn everything about them. Know what makes them tick. Know what makes them think. If you do that and take the time and effort, which very few people do, you will know where their next move is going to be. You can anticipate it and you can thwart them. You can stop them. There's something to that. And that's why the recognition of who our adversaries, enemies are, the globalist cult, and what they are, psychopaths, make it actually very easy when you dissect them of what they're going to do next, where they're going to pull their next card. But you still have people going around talking about the right-left axis stuff. Never on this platform. What do we call it? Operation Freedom. Why? It's because of what I learned from Ronald Reagan when I first went to D.C. to work as an advisor consultant on healthcare policy. The first meeting I was at by his administrative assistant, I believe her name was Kathy, said to the newbies there, quote, "When you present policy to the president, it should never be on the right-left axis. The right-left axis is theater." Interesting, Ronald Reagan being an actor, he saw it as theater. It's meant to divide and conquer. The real axis to focus on is up being freedom and down being oppression. There are people, we were told, didn't say deep state, didn't say globalist cult, but that's who she was referring to via the president. There are people in government and people in the private sector that focus on the oppression side of the axis, and your role is to create policy and provide it to the president that focuses on up, freedom, and in so doing, it blocks those that are focused on oppression. Yeah. But Ronald Reagan was not the first one to tell us about this, right? Let me give you a couple examples. Teddy Roosevelt, in 1906, quote, "Behind the ostensible government sits enthroned an invisible government, owing no allegiance and acknowledging no responsibility to the people. To destroy this invisible government, to befoul this unholy alliance between corrupt business and corrupt politics, is the first task of the statesmanship of today." When he said that, people were like, what's he talking about? He was talking about the up-down axis. He was talking about the psychopaths, the globalists. Another example. I've talked to you about this before, but it bears repeating. The most decorated Marine in U.S. history, General Smedley Butler. In 1935, he wrote a book. War is a racket. Yeah, a racket run by who? The banksters, the globalist syndicate. From Smedley Butler's book. War is just a racket. A racket is best described, I believe, as something that is not what it seems to the majority of the people. Only a small inside group knows what it is about. Know your enemy. It is conducted for the benefit of the very few at the expense of the masses. You, me, everyone we know. "I wouldn't go to war again as I've done to protect some lousy investment of the bankers," he wrote. "There are only two things we should fight for. One is the defense of our homes and the other is the Bill of Rights. War for any other reason is simply a racket. A racket that generates more power, control, and financial resources for our adversary, our enemy, the globalist syndicate." Again, Smedley Butler. "I suspected I was just part of a racket at the time when I was in the military, but now I'm sure of it. Like all the members of the military profession, I never had a thought of my own until I left the service. My mental faculties remained in suspended animation while I obeyed the orders of higher-ups. This is typical with everyone in the military service. During those years in the military, I had, as the boys in the back room would say, a swell racket. Looking back on it, I feel that I could have given Al Capone a few hints. The best he could do was operate his racket in 3 districts in the Midwest. On the other hand, I, working through the military, operated on 3 continents. War is just a racket. A racket that is perpetuated by our enemies, our adversaries, who their playbook tells them they always gain when there's a war. They get more power, more control, more financial resources, and this is where the psychopath part also comes in. Out of these wars, they refer to us, you and me, the 99.9% of us that are not part of the big club, as George Carlin used to say. They refer to us as useless eaters. Who fights those wars? It's us. It's the useless eaters. It's the Jandas. It's the Smiths. It's the Joneses. It's your family name. And we're the ones who die. And the syndicate that pulls the strings to lead to these wars, to perpetuate these wars. The psychopath. They never go to war. When was the last time you saw a Rothschild, a Rockefeller, a Zards, a Pincus, a Warburg, a Seif, a Loeb, a Pessoa family member go to war? No. They just count their money afterwards. No. You see, folks, the key to defeat our enemy, our adversary, is to know who they are and what they're capable of. To anticipate where they're going and to head them off, if you will, at the pass. But if you don't know who your enemy really is and what they're capable of, that's what they're counting on. Because if you don't know who they are, what they're capable of, or where their next move is going and try to anticipate it, they're going to win all the time. Why do you think they've attacked the educational system and dumbed it down so that there's absolutely no education in analytical thinking? Because if you thought analytically, you would be able to anticipate and figure out who the enemy really is and what they were going to do next. They want, and through their educational system and through their media system and through their you name it system, it's all about misinformation, disinformation, and keeping people uninformed. And that leads to them perpetually being in power. And it wasn't just Smedley Butler or Teddy Roosevelt telling us to be on the lookout for how they use war and how they use conflict and how they divide and conquer. But President Eisenhower, and here comes another general, in his farewell address from the presidency on January 17, 1961, he said the following, quote, "In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex, the tentacle of the syndicate. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist." Unquote. You know, a lot of people, obviously that was decades before the internet. When he said that, his words fell on deaf ears. For decades after, his words, Smedley Butler's words, Teddy Roosevelt's words fell on deaf ears. But thanks to members of the independent media and to the internet, there are far fewer deaf ears today than there were in 1961 or 1933 or 1906 or prior. But ultimately, those words need to be networked. And that's where you come in. To educate and empower others, to plant those seeds of thought so they can germinate. That's what the globalist syndicate fears most. Us communicating. It's why they do everything in their power to suppress my videos. Notifications, view counts, likes, notifications, across the board. It's interesting, on YouTube we have, even though the numbers have been suppressed, 158,000 followers. It's been said that when you post a video, even if it's a lousy video, you'll get 50% of your followers that will watch it. So on the back end of the videos, we can take a look. And on average, our videos for the past 5 years, actually 6 years now. So that means if we're getting 50%, we have 160,000 followers. We should have about 80,000. Now, back in the good old days, before the suppression algos, we would have 160,000 followers, and I'd get 800,000 views, 600,000 views. YouTube took our most viewed videos down. No reason given, just vanished. So we actually would not get 50%. We would get 200, 300, 400% views because people would share them. They still are. It's just not counted. So out of 160,000 followers, 50%, we should have 80,000 views from our followers, just our followers. On the back end, 150. 150,000? No, 150. That's what a joke this is. Because they believe if they don't send out notifications, we won't get views, and then they manipulate the view counts on top of it, reduce them by about 99%. It makes it look like the videos aren't very popular, so people won't share them. And if you don't share these, then you're playing their game. They won. Our enemy despises networking, despises communication on our part, despises facts and data and truth. And they'll do everything in their power because they are psychopaths to make sure that people are not informed. There are many issues I cannot speak about on social media platforms because, well, they would just shut down the channels. They still have shut down our Twitter, my original Dr. Dave Janda Twitter channel. And I don't know, at the time when it was taken down January 8th, 2021, for some years ago, 4.5 years ago, we had over 80,000 followers. And that was also suppressed to get to that 80,000. But it's still down. We recently started a new channel, but that's also suppressed. The op2_freedom is the Twitter channel. Facebook is a joke. Rumble is a joke. It's not the censorship-free platform that no. If you're not part of a club, your videos also get suppressed. See, this is why what we do at DaveJanda.com is so important. because I discuss issues I can't discuss on social media platforms. And it just so happens that that information is what puts people months and years ahead of the curve, so that you can anticipate where these psychopaths are going, so you too can protect yourself and your family. I hope you take advantage of it. They surely don't want you to, but I do. We are there for you 24/7 at DaveJanda.com. I thank you for joining me today. Until next time, Dave Janda signing off. Dream big and dare to fail. Thanks for your time today.